Scrooge's Christmas Carol, Releasing the Last Chain. Written and illustrated by C. Pippin Lowe. Stave 10. Self-doubt's calm. With each step, a body part attempted to push, shove, or grab Scrooge. It took him several steps to develop the maneuvers needed for dodging most and forcibly pushing through all other limbs in his way. Once he adapted to the constant attacks coming from the dam, he changed focus by saying, "Thus far, Noah's rainbow-coloured acceptance was the finest." "That was Flora's doing," replied Marley. "How do you know that?" "Noah was not ready for Mogrification. He still had too much anger towards me. He should have been sent back to the den, or even to his chamber in the pit of anger. Acceptance will never happen when forgiveness is lacking." "He did forgive you, Jacob." Marley halted, turned towards Scrooge, then demanded, "How do you know that?" "Oh, do not doubt that Noah still distrusts you. Yet, I think he almost instantly forgave you in the den." "When you say, 'I think,' it does not mean, 'I know,' and yet your statement is as if you have been informed." "Noah did tell me he forgave you. Is that a direct enough statement for you, Jacob?" "It is if I could believe it, but Noah acts like he hates me now. That is not forgiveness." "You do not want forgiveness. You want Noah to act as if nothing happened. This is only about pleasing you, Jacob." "Is there no reward at the completion of a task of outreach?" "Obviously, freeing Noah and Flora is not the total of your task. Jacob, you have a chilly and deceptive demeanor. Noah is wary that this scoundrel drive within you, that you don't even seem to be aware of, will bring him harm again. So, why should he do anything other than forgive you, which is done so he can recover from your evil?" "So, I have lost my brother for eternity." "You have not lost your brother. You have lost the control over your brother." "It is the same in practice." "That it is." The two of them navigated the path of flexing hands and kicking feet. The flapping and fluttering impeded every step travelled, yet eventually the dodging and side movements normalized. As they adjusted to the obstacles on the path, Marley brought the subject of his brother up again. "Why doesn't his forgiveness free me?" "Because it is meant to free himself. The anguish of your actions created your cage. Noah possesses no key to your Mogrification, Jacob. He may have been your task, but he is not your absolution." Jacob stopped for a moment, then spoke of the past. "Maybe being the baby of the family put me in a position of being the spoiled one, the taker within the family." "That is ridiculous. You are still on the path of a scoundrel, Jacob. The sequencing of a child's birth does play a role within the family's power structure. Yet, it was not preordained that you would get your brother killed. That dishonesty you cultivated into your being." Scrooge, having said the harshest, finished with, "You will only find release when you bow to what doomed you. Right now, you have the faulty understanding that what happened was outside of your doing. Jacob, you caused this." All of the fire twirlers within Jacob's heart chain exploded, sending ghostly fragments of him throughout the dam. As his form recreated itself, Jacob gained a realization. He may have always known he caused Noah's torment, but he never felt its burden. His actions at the time were ones of conniving to repair the damage, while he slipped away undetected. And now he realized just how horrible of a human he was. So he cried. These were not the tears of grief, but of cleansing. Self-sorrow left him. As awareness replaced self-preservation, Jacob's emotions quieted. Looking to explain his new insight, Jacob stated, "I feel justice can only be served if I ask for instant mogrification." "Your experiences are lessons the infinite consciousness needs. You may think that instant transmogrification is a righteous punishment for you, but from what I know, it only serves to quiet your angst and would provide nothing to the infinite consciousness. Is that your desire, to turn your back on the responsibility of your life?" "Ebenezer, you amaze me. If only I had your honor." "You have your own goodness, Jacob. Mend it. Do not destroy it." An uneasy silence developed as they passed through the dam. The constant motion of arms pushing legs mesmerized the men. The heap of limbs, which would never be mogrified, emitted an emotional dread that caused Scrooge to become nervous. Marley, for the first time in his life, felt the anxiety of another. Without fire twirlers to propel Scrooge back to the road, Marley settled upon the only thing that entered his mind. For the welfare of his anxious friend, he would quiet the body parts. With a virtuous intention, Marley lay down in front of Scrooge. In hopes of muting the clash of bones, he said to Scrooge, "Walk upon me." This peculiar vision of a ghost covering a field of skeletal remains seemed to be no more than a gesture. Nonetheless, Scrooge stepped upon his friend. The limbs beneath Marley both screamed, then shot through his form with fury. The shock of protruding fingers still attempting to trap Scrooge's legs caused him to jump from the impaled ghost. Marley again joined Scrooge in the middle of the dam of disconnected parts, then declared, "I cannot even get a suitable idea to calm you with, Ebenezer. My failures are overwhelming. And yet, even your desire to improve my condition helps. It is not success, but effort that shows the worth of a person. You, Jacob, seem to be gaining humility. Now, take that seed of awareness and plant it in your actions." At Scrooge's urging, Marley's tensions relaxed. They continued walking toward the other side of the dam. Though the distance to the road was vast, neither any longer seemed distressed by the demand of the area's size. Marley contemplated the new seed of humility he had just gained, while Scrooge walked with caution. Without a word, Marley pulled both a right and a left arm from the dam. From each hand, he removed their index fingers and then gave them to Scrooge. Scrooge backed away from Marley as he exclaimed, "What confusion is this?" "Put each finger in an ear. It may help to hush the din." "You are in earnest?" "I will not stop thinking of ways to help you, Ebenezer." Realizing the assistance was pure in motive, Scrooge placed the bones into his ears. The effect was amazing, for the fingers resonated with the same frequency as did the discarded limbs of the dam. The pulsating of vibrations absorbed all sounds, except muted speech. "Oh my, this is wonderful," announced Scrooge. "Finally, I have done something right." "What? I can hardly hear you," Marley yelled. "Do you feel better?" The volume of Marley's voice shook Scrooge. Hesitating, he looked upon this ghostly friend and then declared, "Your voice is as powerful as a fire twirler. I dare that you could throw me across the dam with your voice." Marley's roar intensified. "Yes, but would you arrive whole?" Before the sentence was finished, Scrooge landed hard on his backside. Squirming from the speaker's force, he rose to announce, "I'll go the safe route." The visual distance to the road remained constantly long. As they walked, a silence grew between them, for it was easier than were the screams currently required for conversation. Marley's silence turned into contemplation, which evolved into dreams, and then into a place of grace that could be touched. As a torrent of responsibility engulfed his spirit, he lifted from the dam. "Jacob, what is happening? Where are you going?" It's my heart chain. It is gone." Straining to hear, Scrooge removed the finger bones, then said, "So, you simply weigh less. That's why you are floating." "Without a doubt. Yet weight was never the burden of that chain." Looking over his shoulder, he then confided, "I'm being called, Ebenezer." "Called? Called what?" "It's where, Ebenezer, not what. The abyss calls." "I'm ready for this," Marley explained as an invisible force tugged at his backside. Being pulled from Scrooge, he yelled, "Just get back to the road, and the way out of Transmogrify will reveal itself." Stunned, Scrooge yelled after Marley as he watched him being carried off. "Just get back to the road? By myself? Humbug, Jacob! Get back here! Humbug, I tell you! Bah! Hum!" But Marley disappeared from sight before Scrooge could find other words to express his anger. Sinking to his knees, he breathed as deeply as his chest cavity would allow, then released a gush of sorrow. "Why does everyone leave me?" He expected no response, but he got one. "I have been with you since the day you were born." Darting his head in every direction, Scrooge looked for the voice, yet no entity had been located when it spoke again. "I will never leave you." Bewildered, he responded, "Fanny, is that you?" "Yes, the whispers of my essence speak." "I hear you through completed thoughts, yet I lack sight of you. Where are you?" "I never spent any interval in Transmogrify, Ebenezer. I am acceptance, and fill every field of frequency at every moment. The strength of my experiences are not specific. They flow everywhere." "So, I will only know your presence by the words in my mind." "Your thoughts create that echo." "Are you real enough to help me get back to London?" "I am here to help you survive the dam." Scrooge gasped at the concept of non-survival. "Would I be gone from your memory if I die in Transmogrify?" "Yes, you would, but none that are watching want that." "Watching? Are there other entities of acceptance here? I cannot see a one." "Look to the corridor of phantoms." Scrooge did as instructed, and then blinked at the sight. Above him, upon the corridor, floated a crowd of spirits. Realizing they were being watched, the horde began to cheer and yell things like, "You are so close to the road!" Another cried out, "Don't get lost!" But it wasn't until he heard, "I'd help if I could," that Scrooge paused. No, he came to a full standstill. His breath could not even be detected. "Are you injured?" asked his sister. "Why can that spirit not help me?" "You've left the road. There is a reason why you were instructed to not do that." "Jacob, what a rogue he remains." "You left the road, Ebenezer. Just because you were coerced does not end your responsibility to maintain your promise." "Transmography is not of my previous knowledge, Jacob." "Yes, Jacob still lacks integrity, but you will have to get back to the road on your own, Ebenezer." "How could Jacob become acceptance with such a weakness? Transmography is hypocritical." "Only the completion of the task of outreach is required for Mogrification. If the infinite consciousness required perfection, even I would have failed that." Scrooge smiled before he commented, "You are flawless, at least in my opinion." "You need to get back to the road." "No matter how far I travel, I never seem to gain distance." "And therein is your difficulty. Look to your left. What do you see?" Scrooge did as instructed, then answered, "The crater." "Now turn around as though you were going back to the pool. Then once again look to your left." The strange request seemed like a game to Scrooge, but he still performed the ask. When he again looked left, he saw the crater. "What mystery is this?" "You, my brother, have entered the crater of severed spirits, except in this case it is actually severed body parts. Nonetheless, this heap of bones we are surrounded by creates the membrane that contains them, much like the spirits in the crater do." "I do not see a covering layer around the dam, not like the one at the crater." "The veneer is no more than wispy, yet it is enough to contain the limbs within the dam." Upon sensing Scrooge's next thought, Fanny added, "This containment is an ethereal facade of symmetrical imagery."
"I think I need a scientist to figure out what that statement means, Fanny."
"In other words, the walls in here are reflective, mirror-like. Does that concept help you, Ebenezer?"
"Most assuredly that explains the lack of forward progress. However, how can I overcome this visual disability?"
"Make yourself blind by closing your eyes." As her brother abided by the directive, the clasping of limbs echoed throughout the dam. "I know you hear the arms and legs in conflict, but listen for the rhythmic, high-pitched sound. Do you hear it?" The effort burdened Scrooge, for the discovery of just one sound over the roar of another could only be known when their vibrations directly entered the mind. Faintly. "Concentrate on that muffled sound, Ebenezer. Is it gaining volume?"
"I do believe so."
"Walk directly toward that sound." Again, Scrooge followed instructions. "Good. Now keep pursuing that tone." The shrill outside of the dam intensified as the extremities being trod upon exploded with brutality. Sensing Scrooge's blindness, the disembodied limbs seemed to focus on tripping him. Arms threw legs across his path, while hands slapped his backside in passing. The constant dodging of aggressive actions resulted in Scrooge losing the concentration needed to hear the pitch. Within his mind, he heard Fanny's encouragement. "You are almost safe. Do not stop."
"I can no longer hear the noise."
"Ebenezer, you have only lost its direction. The sound you are tracking is narrow in range. You need only turn until you hear it again." Fanny's guidance calmed Scrooge's tensions. He never became accustomed to the trouble of the harassing limbs, yet would not allow them to ruin him. A thunderous outcry exploded from the corridor as spirits cheered Scrooge's re-entry to the road. Immediately, Scrooge opened his eyes to find that the source of the clamour in his head was coming from the cycle of greed. While the curious spirits above him began to move toward their own needs, Fanny directed Scrooge by telling him, "The rains of darkness await us." Jacob's fear of the rains flooded into Scrooge's memory, bringing with it the dread of probable dangers.
"I will trust you,"
said Scrooge, more to himself than Fanny. As Scrooge began to walk to the rains, he apologized to his sister.
"I am sorry I never approved of your marriage. Connor was a good man."
"Yes, he was." The thoughts within Scrooge's mind stopped for a moment before he heard, "Yet, Ebenezer, my personal joy for a husband and family caused the abandonment from the two people I loved the most."
"I know I am one of those two,"
said Scrooge. "You are, as was father." Without a physical being to watch, Scrooge struggled with his sister's emotions. "You both rejected me," said Fanny.
"I did not know of this. I was so angry that father removed me from school before I could finish my education, and then he refused to talk to me. I'm so sorry, Fanny, that for years every time I looked at you, I saw him."
"You were not as rejected by him as you think you were." This statement became one Scrooge pondered before he insisted on evidence.
"In what way did father not rebuff me?"
"He kept personal truths from you, so you would not be burdened by his hardships."
"I thought I was his hardship."
Do you remember the new London Bridge scaffolding collapse?
All of England heard about that.
Father nearly died when the scaffolding fell, and he never completely recovered from his injuries. This news shocked Scrooge so completely, he demanded an explanation.
Why am I only hearing this now?
What would you have done if we had told you at the time?
I would have come home and gone to work, like I should have.
No. Father spent his savings so you, Ebenezer, could stay at school for an additional year after the accident. He even forfeited medical attention to help you.
And after I left school, why then was I ostracized?
Father struggled so, especially after you moved back into the house. The accident destroyed his left arm. He had to strap that arm to his front side, or it would swing back and forth with every step.
It is not right that I was never allowed to help.
Father was determined that you would succeed. He made it clear to me that his worry was to never become your concern. It was harsh, yet done with the best of intentions, Ebenezer.
When I was younger, I would have agreed. But now, having lived most of my life, I know this was wrong, Fanny.
Scrooge shook his head back and forth before he finished by saying,
Why did I have to live with the idea that Father hated me? Why could you not have at least comforted that pain within me?
Father threatened to expel me from his life if I did. In the end, he rejected me anyway, the day after Connor and I married.
So, he never approved of Connor.
Actually, he did approve of the marriage, until the day after the wedding.
What happened? Did he not realize you would be moving from our home into Connor's?
No. At the wedding, one of Connor's friends asked him why there was no dowry. Father overheard their conversation and was so embarrassed he disowned me.
You did not deserve such treatment.
And yet you also disowned me, Ebenezer.
I still regret my failings of being an oversensitive, insensitive man.
Scrooge contemplated the mixture of actions that had occurred without his knowledge. The idea his father would sacrifice for him, even when severely injured, had never entered his thoughts. The realization he had lived with this man for years without ever being acknowledged by him brought forth the understanding of just how prideful his father was. In the end, it seemed to have been the only dignity left him, and he used it like a weapon. Arriving at the Rains, Scrooge asked,
Should we not be moving toward the entrance?
Only the Rains of Darkness allow the living to pass through Transmogrify. You, Ebenezer, were given special access because you promised to stay on the road of phantoms. Scrooge swallowed hard before he admitted,
I know, but I didn't keep that promise.
No, you did not. However, when you fix the promise, the abuse will be forgiven, but not forgotten.
Has not re-entry to the road fixed the promise?
Not completely. You must commit to stay on the road, no matter the circumstances, from here until there.
Truly, Fanny, I am too tired to leave the road. So, I do pledge to stay on the road.
Stopping in front of the Rains, Scrooge watched the downpour as Fanny said, Ebenezer, you are there. Enter the Rains of Darkness. The last word, darkness, reverberated throughout Scrooge's mind. The echo grabbed his heart, then squeezed it into his quivering voice.
The fright in Jacob's reign scares me still, yet it holds no dread in comparison to the dishonor I would suffer if I left the road. I just remade that promise, and I will keep it until I am told we are there, even if staying here means elimination.
You know it is more dire for you than that. Elimination is the loss of the body. Nullification is the loss of both body and spirits. You will be nullified without anyone retaining a memory.
I will not cross the road until I am
there. Silence developed into tension. The honor of your word has been restored, Ebenezer. Now it is time to face your fears. Look upon the rains. What do you see?" Scrooge had no idea what he should be looking for, but finally said, "A deluge." One could sense Fanny smiling when her next thought released. It has been established the rains appear to be wet. But for you, Ebenezer, the rains are there. It is now time for you to face your most difficult fear. Walk from the road. Enter the rains.
"So, this place, the rains, is the there of my promise?"
"Yes, it is the pathway."
"Will you join me? Are the rains dangerous for you, Fanny?"
"Nowhere is dangerous, or is any particular location kept from acceptance. Nonetheless, Ebenezer, this is your journey. You must complete it by yourself."
Scrooge pointed to the downpour, then confirmed, "So, I should go in there."
"It is in your best interest."
"A while back, Jacob asked me who I loved, and I said no one. But I was wrong, Fanny, for I have always loved you."
"You love others, Ebenezer. You just have not identified who."
"After Belle left me, I never cared to find another romantic partner."
"Love is infinitely more powerful than is romance."
"I have no children to love, yet I think all of the Cratchit children think I love them."
"Do you?"
"Is love just the creation of momentary emotions, or is it a forever event that captures emotions?"
asked Scrooge. "It can be those, and more. Love is both abstract and concrete. One cannot put a muscle to love, yet love has the might to end wars. Mothers filled with love have died for their children. The man who pulled our father from the icy Thames saved his life through love. He brought forth the same love that the task of outreach creates within Transmogrify, which is one of service to others." Fanny allowed her brother a pause, then asked again, "Do you love the Cratchit children?"
Scrooge thought for a moment, then announced, "The children are a bit of a worry for me. Can you love something you worry about?"
Fanny laughed at Scrooge's innocence. "That is part of the parents' love. Not all of the love parents will give to their children, but concern starts from day one, and it is connected to love. Ebenezer, you are sounding like a parent."
"I do care for the children. However, to say I cherish each equally, I am not sure I can do that. It seems my nature is to like some children more than others, so I probably would not be a loving parent."
"Do you treat the child you love best better than the others?"
"No, I never do that."
"You do actually know love, Ebenezer. However, you, like most, forget that love's greatest power is one of being both an abstract in concept, yet a concrete force in action."
"You keep telling me that, but, Fanny, do not all strong emotions carry a force of energy? Is not terror just as powerful as is love?"
"Absolutely. Yet who do you know that will run toward terror? Love gives humanity the desire to create greatness. From the moment of birth, love is what the individual runs toward."
"Yes, I guess most people will do anything to avoid terror. So, as I understand it, what we emphasize gains strength, and what we forget about weakens."
"That has always been the truth of reality, Ebenezer. And now you must face your greatest vulnerability. You must enter the reigns of darkness. Do not be afraid, and accept relief if it finds you." Quaking, Scrooge nonetheless slid into the storm. Instantly, a vertical outburst of iridescence overwhelmed every cell of his body. Bathed in light, his skin began to tingle from the sensation of the caress. As he moved deeper into the flood of luminescence, his vision gave way to a blinding paleness. For a moment, he lost his bearings, tripped, then fell. He sat upon the physical, yet obscured floor. As he pulled his knees to his chest, he began to laugh uncontrollably. The sound echoed continuously, with the area quieting only after the gaiety was forcibly stopped. Without fear, he rose to his feet and just began to walk. He was not sure if he was being brave or stupid, but an overwhelming yearning to trust the ambiguity of his situation consumed all desires to panic. He still had fear of what he could not identify, yet he now trusted deeply, that transmography would keep him safe. As Scrooge walked, the wall of light began to give way to visibility. With his sight being restored, he stepped into a cavernous room filled with throbbing stalactites. The visual appearance of the cave plagued his memory. Moving to the center of the room, he realized the stalactites were not made of mineral, but instead pulsated with life. 2 different types of protrusions covered the ceiling. The most active of the 2 were small, rust-colored cocoon-shaped membranes. However, the most frightening ones were twice the size and created a swirl of mist around themselves for concealment. Looking up toward the constant motion of the ceiling, he watched with mouth ajar as the smaller projections split open. The force released thousands of tiny brownish moths into the room. With the purpose of want, they descended upon Scrooge. Each moth groaned with desires as they landed upon him. The best of them just expressed the need for survival. The worst of them immediately began eating his clothes in hope of providing their own means of existence. Before Scrooge could protect himself, the creatures covered his form. As the bugs began to crawl into all of Scrooge's openings, the larger cocoons released a mayhem of enormous, ever-changing moths. Flying under a cloak of haziness, each moth landed upon several smaller moths, pinning them to their location. While the smaller moths continued to lament their wants, the larger creatures erroneously asserted that those beneath them deserved their misfortune. Both groups of brutes combined atop Scrooge in an effort to drain all of his resources. The beings had overtaken him so quickly he never even attempted to brush them from his clothing, and now it was too late to react. Paralyzed by the flying creatures, the only action left for him was to scream out for relief. "What now must I do for those in want and ignorance?" Covered in a myriad of moths, Scrooge began to breathe his last. As his knees started to give way to the dead weight of his body, he cried out, "Will no one help?" One knee thumped the ground with such a force it caused the other leg to buckle as well. "Please," he whimpered. As he began to collapse, a small human hand grabbed his little finger. "You do enough, Mr. Scrooge." Squeezing with force, the child's hand shook his wrist, and with it released a cloud of moths. "Every individual is responsible for the social condition." The cub of a human yanked the old man's arm until the menacing creatures flew from their prey. The majority of insects continued to levitate within the haze created by the larger moths. With every flutter of their wings, a fresh release of fog concealed all within its influence of ignorance. So the child jostled Scrooge until the room was cleared of danger. Scrooge rose from his knees. Focusing on the youth before him, he realized he knew her. Elizabeth. "Mama and I are here for Papa. Can we secure your help, Mr. Scrooge?" "I am indebted to you for my life." As Scrooge gazed upon the mother and daughter ghosts, the flickering of a third person began to appear. "My husband is dying," announced Nancy. "The lieutenant." "Gilbert will arrive to Tien soon, yet I fear it is Humphrey that will be lost without your help, Ebenezer." "Is Gilbert succumbing to a bullet wound?"
No, Crimea is riddled with cholera.
Scrooge looked at the other victims of that dreaded disease, then asked,
How? What can I do?
The knowledge of Gilbert's passing may take months to reach Humphrey. He will be distraught and powerless. Peter helps as he can, but Humphrey will require more direction. He will need mentoring.
Does the boy have desires?
Science. Only science.
Then I know of a confidant. I will stabilize your son's future.
You are our blessing. Now, be gone. Scrooge, asleep in the chair next to his extinguished fireplace, jolted upright. Wildly blinking as the morning sun began to flow through his window, he realized his clothes were honeycombed with moth holes. Jumping to his feet, he heard the chimes from St. James's Piccadilly Church, and then he knew the day was Christmas. Dancing around his room, he sang in a cheerful yet tone-deaf manner. Cleaning himself for the holiday celebrations, Scrooge put on his best suit, combed his thinning hair, wrote out 3 letters, then placed each within its own envelope. Folding the letters into the pocket of his jacket, he left his home and began walking toward the Royal Institution's Great Hall. With each step, the smells of roasted chestnuts, baking bread, and the ever-present odor of horse manure combined to create a mostly pleasant experience for those going about their holiday. As he walked, Scrooge bowed in greeting to those he passed. He only stopped when he passed a beggar, dropped his daily coin in the cup, then heard, "You do enough, Mr. Scrooge." Turning to see who the beggar was, he looked at the beggar, then to himself whispered, "Do I?" The beggar, realizing the words were not actually meant for his ears, just affirmed his statement by shaking his head up and down. Scrooge, still not accepting his worth, nonetheless moved on. The day was special, but not out of the ordinary for Christmas. With the temperatures being mild for winter, only the wind from the north gave any indication that the weather could turn to bluster. But for the moment, the sun was shining, and Scrooge was whistling, not in tune of course, but with a cheer that all onlookers recognized as being merry. The street bustled with colourful crowds of performers, vendors, and carolers. Carriages moved like a river along the cobblestoned roadways. Buildings decorated in holly, evergreens, and ribbons lined both sides of every London road. Laughter was the mood of the population. As Scrooge dodged a juggler tossing multiples of knives, he flung a coin into the performer's jar, then heard, "You do enough, Mr. Scrooge." Scrooge, without hesitation, just shook his head back and forth. Nearing the Royal Institution, Scrooge removed the envelope marked Charitable Trust from his coat, then stepped into the building's entrance. Walking directly to the lecture theatre, he watched as Michael Faraday set up his Christmas lecture on the chemistry of combustion. Readying a long tray which housed various chemicals, Scrooge watched as Faraday set the container on fire. Multiple flames erupted, creating flames of blue, green, and purple. "That is going to create an uproar," declared Scrooge. Looking up from his table, Faraday said, "Ebenezer, how long have you been standing there?" "Just arrived, Michael." "Do you think the children will be impressed with this demonstration?" "I think even their parents will be impressed," assured Scrooge. "Sometimes they are more captivated than are the youth. Fire does take one to notice, and coloured fire, well, that is about as noticeable as fire comes." "I doubt you are here to be charmed by fire. So, how can I help you, Ebenezer?" Scrooge handed the envelope marked Charitable Trust to Faraday and said, "I would like to pay for the education of a young man named Humphrey Albright." "This is unusual, Ebenezer, but tell me about the boy. Is he curious, smart, and willing to work hard?" "As I have come to know of him,
He is a quality person.
We demand not only quality, but also intellect from our people.
I've been told all he thinks about is science.
Ebenezer, why are you doing this?
The child has just become an orphan.
Far too many orphans walk the streets of London. What makes this one different?
I'm sure I really like this child.
So, you find him special, yet will I?
Yes,
You will find him unique, helpful, and exceptional. Taking the envelope from Scrooge, Faraday opened it, looked at the amount being provided for the boy, then slowly focused upon Scrooge's eyes. This is more funds than are required to educate a dozen fellows.
As long as Humphrey is taken care of, do what you want with any extra money.
I only want to make sure there is ample for the youth. This is more than enough, Ebenezer. If the boy is capable, we will make a scientist out of him.
One last thing, Michael. Please, do not let the boy know you are aware of his family loss.
Somewhat puzzled, Faraday agreed, and with that Scrooge left the building. He entered the street, expecting to be greeted by holiday cheer. In spite of that assumption, Scrooge found himself in the middle of an argument. Surrounded by a group of onlookers, the two people in the middle could be heard bickering.
"Show me your license,"
demanded the constable. I'm just singing carols. Can't a person entertain and gain a meal without inviting the monarchy?
"Do not beg me. Your kind never knows lawful employment. Show me your license, or move on."
You'd deny me even a meal?
With the quality of your voice, I'd deny that you even deserve a meal.
With this comment, Scrooge stepped forward, then said,
"The Christmas celebration is about the opening of the heart to the plight of those in need. This woman appears to be in need.
The law's the law, and the state is not responsible for the witless."
Your cruelty of words dumbfounds me. Sir, were you born ignorant, or is that a quality that you have cultivated?"
The constable's eyes narrowed, and staring directly into the black of Scrooge's pupils, he snarled, "Just lessen the volume." With that, the officer stormed off, probably in search of another less fortunate to harass. Dropping a pence into the woman's cup, Scrooge started walking toward his counting house, when he heard an echo of voices call after him, "You do enough, Mr. Scrooge." To himself, he reasoned, "Maybe I do." Rounding the block to his business, the swinging sign above the door indicated the northern wind was gaining strength. Entering the building, he recalled the day he and Jacob moved into the location, some 30 years previously. A melancholy of memories flashed throughout his mind, but nothing settled into an anecdote. Alone, within the workers' room, he looked upon their desks. Each had the workers' Boxing Day envelope sitting within the middle of their writing area. The usual quid held the envelope in place. Scrooge walked into his and Bob's office. Upon his partner's desk, he placed an envelope that simply said, "Bob Cratchit." Putting his hand on the envelope, he whispered, "You have been my conscience, Bob, showing me the worth of that which is outside of myself." Looking at the safe, he had an idea. Opening its door, he removed a handful of quid. Returning to the workers' tables, he slid the center quid to the top left corner of each envelope. Upon each of the 3 remaining corners, he added another quid. With the 4 corners of the envelopes covered in coins, he thought, "It would take a force stronger than the Dover Straits earthquake to move those funds." From his backside, he heard, "You do enough, Mr. Scrooge." Turning to face the familiar voice, he said, "I have been told that." Pausing, he added, "I'm surprised your family would allow you time away from them today." "I am no longer used to the squeals of delighted children."
"They have you seeking privacy, do they?"
"Well, at least a bit of quiet. I will return once the fervour lessens. What are you doing here, Ebenezer?"
Handing Bob the envelope with his name on it, he revealed, "I am going to retire, Bob." "Retirement? My, what brought this on?" "Feeble bones, my friend, feeble bones. I would never insist on this, Bob, but I would like you to make Peter Nider a manager. It is all explained in the envelope." "Peter is a good man, but it is Fingal who is waiting for a promotion." "Yes, I know that. Since I am leaving, you can promote them both. It should be easy to invent a special advancement for Fingal." "So, this is goodbye?" "I will be around. Don't get too fancy yet." "Extravagance? Me? I bet your grandchildren have discovered your absence." "Actually, I doubt that. When I left them, they were inventing methods for wrecking gifts. However, I enjoyed their gaiety, and hunger will take me home soon. But, Ebenezer, I am so sad you are leaving." "Time halts only in wishes. I need this, Bob. I need this." "Then I am glad you are able to do it." As they made their way to the entrance, Cratchit extended his right hand to his partner. Scrooge grabbed the hand, pulled it close to him, then gave his friend a hug he could never forget. Leaving the building, each turned in opposite directions. Before Cratchit turned the corner, Scrooge spun around. He wanted to tell his partner he loved him, but nervousness stopped him. He himself did not understand the extreme friendship that had grown between them. A tear dropped from the corner of his right eye before he turned, wiped any remaining moisture from his face, then began moving toward Fred and Eleanor's home. The brisk London air nipped at Scrooge's nose as he reached his nephew's doorstep. Today, however, the chill could not dampen his spirits. He could hardly wait to see those mischievous twins, Eleanor's little imps, bouncing around the Christmas tree like overstuffed geese. Pushing open the door, he bellowed, "Eleanor, it's just your uncle." Before he could close the door, a whirlwind of tiny feet and joyous shrieks engulfed him. "Uncle Scrooge, you're early!" squealed two voices in perfect unison. Scrooge prepared himself for the girl's embrace by pressing his back against the door. "Hold on, you whirlwinds! I can barely keep up with one of you, let alone two." "Come play! Father Christmas has been here!" Each niece latched onto a leg and began pulling it toward the parlor. The combined force of legs moving in different directions threatened to topple Scrooge. Bracing himself against the door, he said, "I will follow you." Pointing to his feet, he laughed. "Just like you, I also have two legs." As they entered the room, a blast of Christmas cheer hit him. The tree shimmering with decorations, cinnamon, and the roar of a fire combined to fill the air with the sensation of holiday happiness. Upon the dinner table sat a gingerbread house, somewhat lopsided but undeniably charming. Toys were scattered everywhere, each one bearing the mark of brief yet enthusiastic play. Before they disappeared into a flurry of Christmas merriment, Scrooge managed to get out, "Eleanor, my dear, did you hear me? I'm early." A muffled voice called back from the kitchen, "Almost there, Uncle Scrooge." "Look what Father Christmas brought me!" Ebby exclaimed, thrusting a brightly painted wooden train engine into his hands. Fanny, ever the competitor, interjected, "Can you read my book to me?" Scrooge, ever the charmer, winked, then said, "How about I read the book while the train takes us on a grand adventure around the gingerbread house?" The twins giggled as their faces lit up like Christmas candles. However, with the twins being in a state of holiday excitement, focus shifted to a new wonderment. "I made up a riddle," said Fanny. "Me too," Ebby exclaimed. A little surprised, Scrooge instructed, "I'd love to hear them both. First, you, Fanny." Fanny recited her riddle. "I have guards that stand like statues.
flags that fly without leaving the roof. I am a magical home, yet have no dragons. What am I?" Scrooge stroked his chin thoughtfully.
"Well, that's a tricky one. Can I have another clue?"
Before Fanny could answer, Ebby blurted out, "It's Buckingham Palace." Scrooge burst out laughing, but said seriously,
"Ebby, this is not your riddle."
Fanny, ever the diplomat, stated, "Don't worry, Uncle Scrooge. You would have gotten it eventually without her help." Scrooge smiled at her kindness while saying,
"Now it's your turn, Ebby. What's your riddle?"
Ebby, determined to outshine her sister, declared, "Across the Thames I lie, horses trot atop me, while boats chug beneath me. What am I?" Scrooge pretended to ponder deeply.
"Across the Thames, you say? Horses and boats? I know this one. Is it the Blackfriars Bridge?"
Ebby's face fell. "No, that's not our main bridge."
"Then it must be London Bridge."
Ebby's eyes lit up. "You got it." With the palms of his hands, Scrooge tousled their hair.
"You're both geniuses."
"Uncle Scrooge, you're smart too. Now it's your turn." Feeling the burden of having to quickly think, Scrooge finally said,
"One giggles loud, one giggles often. A face is shared, but not a name. Who are we?"
The girls exchanged a knowing glance before rejoicing. "It's us!"
Scrooge roared with laughter. "Masterminds! Absolutely brilliant! You two are the merriest present I could ever want."
The three played for a while longer before Eleanor entered the parlour. "Ebenezer, what brings you here so early?" They embraced in a hold of equal admiration. Upon separation, a dusting of flour drifted to the floor. Scrooge kissed her cheek as he confessed,
"I had a tough sleep."
"So, the twins have been keeping you awake?"
"Just like a factory whistle. However, I mostly came early to help you, Eleanor."
She stepped back from Scrooge, eyed him up and down, then slowly said, "Help me?"
"Yes, in the kitchen. Has no one ever helped you fix a meal?"
"Of course, and I have helped other women too, but never a man."
"I am here to prove that men can do more than just eat. So, how can I help you, Eleanor?"
"I guess the potatoes need peeling?"
"I believe I can use a knife well enough to be of benefit,"
he said, as they walked toward the cutting table. The kitchen appeared as if it had been tussled in a storm. Bowls and food lay atop every surface. The stuffed goose rested within its pan, just waiting to be cooked. As the mincemeat pie in the oven mellowed the mind with aromas, Scrooge looked at the potatoes, carrots, and parsnips that still needed to be prepared. Before Scrooge began dicing, he removed the last envelope from his coat pocket and handed it to Eleanor.
"I hope I am not being too forward."
Receiving the envelope, she cautiously looked inside. Instantly, she handed it back to Scrooge. "No, I cannot take this. Fred—"
"I was hoping he would be here. I will talk to him later. But you need this, Eleanor. For the twins, if not for yourself."
"Fred provides."
"This is not about Fred, but it is about how society will treat you if anything should happen to him."
"That is the women's lot. I cannot go against that."
"I am not asking you to. I only want to provide you with security. Every farthing within that envelope is a meal, a bed, clothing, and life itself."
When Eleanor heard the phrase, "and life itself," tears erupted. Scrooge, though puzzled, just put his hand on her shoulder. The gesture was of no comfort, for she turned to him, then began openly crying. "I am so afraid." Scrooge allowed her the time to convey her fears. "I think I am pregnant, Ebenezer." Immediately, he understood.
This is exactly one of my concerns. Childbed fever. He paused before he continued with his own story. You know I lost my mother. She died so I could live. It has been a lifelong burden for me to have done that to her.
Scrooge paused, then spoke about assistance.
At the time of my birth, help beyond midwives remained unnecessary, at least to society. Today, however, lying in hospitals care for those who can pay, and I want to provide the funds for that.
Eleanor kept crying tears of relief and love for this help. A dusting of snow trailed Fred through the door. Before he could utter a sound, the eruption of boundless energy raced toward him.
Father, you're back! Did you bring him?
Struggling to bring the box he was carrying into the home, he answered,
I couldn't get the pony in the crate, but I brought you something better.
What's better than a pony?
Complained Ebbie. Shuffling toward the bright red cloth in the corner, Fred slid the wooden box onto a small table. With imaginations running wild, the twins stroked the box as though it contained the lives of their wishes.
What is it? Is it a puppy?
Fanny asked while dancing in place. Fred chuckled.
Maybe next year, when you're a little older.
His smile generated warmth as his words ignited the girl's visions.
There is magic here. Magic of the mind.
The girls carefully lifted the box's lid, then cheered with delight. Inside the box lay a fairy tale village, meticulously crafted from wood and stone. Tiny houses, painted in vibrant colours, lined the cobblestone streets.
Oh, Father,
Ebbie squealed, her eyes wide with wonder.
But how do we go inside?
Fred grinned. Only your inspirations will enter this hamlet. As he left the girls to their play, a joyous sound of laughter could be heard from the kitchen. Fred entered the kitchen to find Eleanor and Scrooge tossing flour at each other. Covered in the ghostly substance, they stopped mid-throw when they saw Fred in the corner of the room, just watching them.
It looks like I've missed the fun.
Oh no, you are just in time, said Eleanor,
throwing her handful of powder onto his coat. The three dodged each other as they continued the activity of dusting the room with flour. The play only changed when Ebbie and Fanny entered the kitchen. Watching the adults' commotion, Ebbie loudly said,
I thought we were the children.
Having been found out, the three became as still as statues. Each of their facial expressions showed the guilt of having played like ruffians. And then, both Eleanor and Fred tossed a handful at each of the girls. The kitchen, in no time, was turned as white as snow collecting on top of a frozen lake during a blizzard. Laughter surrounded the entire home with mischief, as all five finally calmed enough to repair the kitchen from the family's frolicking. Once the work and play finished within the kitchen, Scrooge and the twins returned to the parlour. He sat near the fireplace in the home's most comfortable chair, then promptly fell asleep. The twins played with the fairy tale village, both imagining a similar yet unique fable. As Scrooge relaxed into slumber, his mouth began to open and close with each snore. Competing with the crackling fire, Ebbie and Fanny watched in awe as Scrooge's snorts and wheezes began to control the quiet. And then, when Scrooge had his mouth at its widest, Ebbie put her first finger inside of it. Quickly she removed it before he could bite down. The twins laughed with a thrill that no Christmas toy could ever provide. And so, this pleasure became their play. Fingers in and out, one then the other invaded the opening. Giggles erupted so loudly that Fred investigated.
Girls, do you think that might be disrespectful to your uncle? He doesn't even know.
That may make it even more impolite. Fanny, losing focus, yelped when Scrooge bit her.
He knows now, Fred said,
then added,
it is time to get cleaned up for supper."
Both girls ran from the room, while Scrooge continued to snore.
"Ebenezer! Ebenezer! It's time for dinner,"
his slumber continued. Squatting next to Scrooge, Fred looked into his uncle's face while gently shaking his shoulder.
"Ebenezer! Ebenezer!"
Without a response, he grabbed both shoulders, then attempted to bring Scrooge back from sleep. Finally, Scrooge jolted upright. Coughing as he gulped air, he moaned,
"I love my sister."
Fred, a little surprised, replied, "Everyone loved Mother."
"But I still love her."
Me too. Fred hesitated before saying, "Her death, well, at times it is still difficult. But today is a joyous one, with a pair of youth compelled to keep us smiling, and a meal bound to put us to sleep. So, what do you say, Uncle? Shall we partake in the delight?" Scrooge smiled as he grabbed Fred's helping hand. Eleanor entered, carrying the smells of the kitchen, along with a bowl full of steamed carrots and potatoes. "Fred, will you help me with the goose?" Both men cheerfully followed, for the air full of flavors controlled the growls in their bellies. Quickly, the parlor with its colorful Christmas tree, blazing fireplace, and countless toys shifted attention toward the feast. Both of the children inspected the food after each bowl was added to the table. With the goose being the last addition, the holiday came forth in celebration.
"Before we begin, a toast to the season," said Fred. "To the new year. May it bring fewer arguments and extra holidays."
The adults laughed as Scrooge asked, "Barrister problems?" Fred just shook his head back and forth. "I want to do a toast," said Ebby. "Then me," insisted Fanny. A deceptive grin formed on Ebby's face as she spoke. "Mine is to the goose. May he last as long as I can chew, and taste better than he looks." All but Eleanor laughed as Fanny declared, "Mine is for the Christmas pudding. May its hardness endure the stomach, and its taste find it worthy of swallowing." "I'm starting to feel a little overlooked here," said Eleanor. Fred winked, then said, "But it is your turn to belittle another. So, what say you, Eleanor?" "In that case, I will toast Uncle Scrooge. May your throwing arm always fall short of its mark, and your generosity forever exceed the volume of your snoring." The twins pointed to Scrooge as they laughed about their recent antics with the snoring uncle. Scrooge looked upon these intuitive siblings, then announced,
"I have the best toast here."
"Well, by all means, Ebenezer, please," Fred trailed off as he expected Scrooge to begin his toast.
"I raise my glass to the twins. Here is to the chaos makers, laughter bringers, and future Christmas carolers, if they are able to stay in tune." "I can sing better than Ebby, but I can remember the words." "All right, girls, today is not the day for this kind of trifling."
After the meal, the holiday swiftly dwindled. Fred offered the game of whist as after-dinner fun, but Scrooge instead called for a carriage. As he left, Fred was in the process of moving the fairy tale village to the girls' sleeping room. The bounce of the stagecoach rapidly transformed the fatigued Scrooge's steady breathing into snores. Once parked in front of his Sackville address, the driver had to jump down from his seat so as to shake the elderly fellow awake. Scrooge gave the man an extra coin for his concern. Entering his winter home was always a shock, but never a surprise. The chill of the unattended structure numbed the thin man's bones. As the immediate need became heat, he remembered the day, especially the frisky twins. While the fire lifted soot into the chimney, Scrooge collapsed into his chair. Sleep led to snores, which led to muscle relaxation,
which led to the failure of his core. With his chin relaxing on the top of his chest, a dusting of flour fell from his collar as his life ended.
Father, I want to play more. We have had a long day. It's time for bed. Your mum will be here soon, and you know what that means. The girls were beyond nagging, so continued with their pleasure.
Within a flurry of activity, they had transformed their village into a farm.
Adding their own wooden animals to the scene created an atmosphere so real one could almost smell the dung.
As Fred walked past the mirror in the twins' room, he took note of extra gestures. Facing the mirror, he saw not his own reflection, but instead the vision of Ebenezer Scrooge.
Uncle? Be calm, Fred. What do I make of this? I have a request, and this is the proper time.
Scrooge just ignored the ask, then spoke of his priority.
I've given Eleanor £2,000 in consul's bonds.
2,000 quid? How dare you?
It seems telling you to be calm is a waste. However, I would like to talk about this, as it has already been done.
Fred exhaled with such a gust that Fanny looked up to investigate her father's angst. Seeing his reflection, she cried out, "Look, Ebby, Father's starting to look like Uncle Scrooge." Together they giggled as their frolic endured.
Fred, you may think I have overstepped here, but I am worried about any harm that could end you.
Fred pulled in more air than he needed before saying,
Eleanor has no knowledge of finances. Women do not have the talent for it. We protect. Oh, rubbish. Humbug. Stop chattering about false tenets. But the cult of domesticity, only created for obedience.
Scrooge paused, then asked,
Have you even thought about what would happen to the girls if you died?
I have avoided that subject, so it would not be brought into play.
My good man, preparations are never a waste.
Scrooge explained his reasoning for empowering Eleanor without consent.
I've seen too much to avoid this. We who have funds never even glance at the hardships created when the breadwinner falls.
The Widows' Protection Act provides security.
Eleanor would receive your clothing, but not your house or money. At your death, she would still lack full rights. And the twins, I can't even think about their possible abuses.
With a desire to calm tensions, Scrooge finished with,
And then there is the new baby.
New baby?
Again, I have exceeded myself here. New baby? That is news I need to think about. I heard the name Joyce, but can't tell if that will bring a boy or a girl. To me it doesn't matter. But it should, for society will dictate their freedoms at birth.
Searching for a continued method of persuasion, Scrooge added,
I can't force you to be mindful, but I have provided as best I can for your family's security, should your demise come too early. I should be grateful, but I feel slighted. I haven't the understanding to know if that is due to the fact I acted without consultation, or because you have a need to protect your control.
Breathing out, Fred said, Both put me in a puny way.
Yeah.
Scrooge looked over his shoulder, smiled, then said,
I'm being called. Remember to live in at least kindness. Wait, what's happened, Unc? Yeah.
Thank you for listening to Scrooge's Christmas Carol, Releasing the Last Chain. London voice actor Nathan Chatelier brought this story alive for you. He can be reached at the link given below, within the description of this video.